Welcome to the house that Ross built today. We have a special guest. He's an author, business owner, wealth of knowledge, you know, all across the board has helped me. Like we always say that on this podcast, I bring on people that help influence my life in some way, fashion, form, or other. And hopefully they can do the same for you. And that's why we're here. We're sharing that with you. And today we have special guests that we have built a relationship, you know, we've had a relationship. We built a closer relationship over the last few months. Been spending some time with him, doing some work for him. And, like I said, I wanted to bring him on so he can share his knowledge with you all. Like I said, he is an author, so we're going to talk about his book and we're just going to have a conversation like we always do. So I'd like to welcome Myran Jones to the podcast today.
Oh, thank you, Ozzy. Thank you for having me, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us, spending the time with us. So we'll get right into it. Let's talk a little bit. Let's talk about the book. Go ahead and share with the audience the name of the book and what was your reason for writing it.
Okay. The name of the book is "But Hey, What Do I Know?" And initially, I didn't know what I wanted to name the book. I initially thought "Culture Shockwave" because I knew the content was going to shock a lot of people. But I said, well, I started looking across Amazon and Barnes and Noble and saw that, some other people had used that name, that title. And I said, no, I want to be kind of original. And so I just started throwing around some names and I said, what's a catchy title? Because I've also come across books that have catchy titles and I've bought them and started reading them. And I said, man, ain't nothing good about this book but the title. And so, I came up with, but hey, what do I know? And I asked a few people, I asked my wife about it. And everybody I pushed that topic to, they just thoroughly enjoyed it. And, over the years, Ozzy and I share one of our mentors. And I think he's probably been on the show before, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But it was he who actually told me I needed to stop playing around and write the book. And, I kept telling him, because he had been telling me for years, man, you need to write the book. You're sitting on too much knowledge. I said, I don't want to write no book. He said, man, you need to write the book. I said, I don't want to write no book. And he just stayed on me. He said, man, he said, don't take this stuff to the grave with you. And so I started just working on the book slowly and, just looking at, and the book is a compilation of what we see. I mean, anybody can read it, regardless of race, culture, background. And I believe everybody can benefit from it. And, I start off, kind of talking about what I call the foundation of our Black community, which is the man. And, talk about what the man's responsibility should be and how we've kind of strayed away from, our roles, duties, and responsibilities as men. And then, I backdoor that talking about, our Black women and the character that they need to have because, we love to quote I believe Mary McLeod Bethune's quote, the character of a race is judged by the character of its woman. And sadly, it's not all, it's never all. Sadly, a lot of our women don't model that character that they say we should have. And so, I kind of addressed that in the next chapter. The book is 10 chapters. I believe you can, if you're an astute reader, you're a good reader, you could probably get the book read within a day or two. I think it's roughly 236 pages. Chapter 3, I just talk about a lot of the behavior that we do that we call it Black culture, and it's more Black ignorance. And that's just my opinion. That's not Mr. Ross's opinion. That's my opinion. It's my book.
My opinion too.
And then, I kind of, I was an athlete growing up. I played football. I ran track. I played football in college at the University of Houston. And one thing I've realized is our short-term economic solution, which is what I talk about in the book, is focused on trying to get to the NFL or the NBA. Now, it's a lot of our dreams, and like talking with Mr. Ross, I know he loves baseball, and I never really played baseball much after, unless I was playing in the alley on the side of my house. But I never really got off into that as far as a organized structural thing. But we're being pushed a lot of times in our culture to try to get those NBA or NFL contracts. And although the contracts are substantial in the beginning, it's still short term. And if you don't have any skills after your career days, you're going to be kind of out of luck. And I remember one of my little league football coaches, had a discussion with me, and he gave me well, I could say second job, but my first job was on a farm up in East Texas one year. And I was 14 years old, but he gave me a job at age 16 at a company called Ecker Drugs, which is now CBS. And he would talk to me a lot about, the future. He said, Myron, he said, if you're fortunate to get drafted into the NFL, he said, you need to be careful with how you spend your money. He said, because, a lot of these guys go buy a whole bunch of cars. He said, and they got all these apartments and all of this stuff. He said, and all they need is one career-ending injury. He said, and all that's gone. He said, if you're driving a hoopty when you get drafted, he said, you keep driving that hoopty if it's running okay. And so our short-term economic solution is, we try to push our young men towards sports, and you can see that with a lot of the parents now putting their kid in every camp that's available. And I was actually looking at it's another gentleman. I don't think I'd get in trouble for saying his name, but he's pushing economics in the Black community. Named Boyce Watkins.
Yeah.
And Boyce Watkins was saying the other day, because I try to catch him when I can, because he has a daily show that comes on every morning as well. Oh, okay. And he was talking about, he said, think about the money that you spent placing your child in a sports camp. He said, now, if you took that same money that you've been putting into a sports camp for the same amount of time, he said, by the time your child was 22, your child would never have to work a day in their life if you invested it properly. And that hit me like a ton of bricks. And so, but moving along from that, moving to the next chapter, I kind of talk about what I call the way we can gain economic freedom and independence. And the only way we're going to be able to do that is through business ownership. And I put a lot of historical accounts into that chapter about men and women who achieved great financial and economic success through business ownership. So yeah, I read something a few weeks ago, and I mean, it was just an eye opener to me, because we love to talk about slavery. We don't like the stain of it, but we love to talk about it because in my experience, we love being victims.
Yeah.
So the stat said in the year 1860, 99% of blacks in America were employed by white corporations, meaning slavery. And it said right today, 98% of black people are employed by white corporations. And I think, man, we haven't made any progress. But see, I can't get into all the details in the book about the progress of how we got there, but I do include a lot of that on my YouTube channel because I can talk freely. And if you go to my YouTube channel, you'll see that, because I talk for some videos 2-3 hours, nonstop. But I get into a lot of those details on my YouTube channel because I'm the type of person I love to read. And I'll read a book no matter how long it is if I think it has value. But I know most people in society are not going to pick up a book that's 500, 600, 700 pages long because initially that's how long the book was going to be. Yeah. And then I said, I need to cut and splice because I don't want to put something out there that nobody's going to get bored with after a couple of 100 pages. And so I took out a lot of information from what it initially was. And then I move on. Because like I said, the book's only 10 chapters. And, I wanted it to be a quick read, but a very informative and engaging read. And I talk about how we're fascinated when we look at economic systems, how we continue to listen to what we call our Black leadership when they continue to put down capitalism. And there was a guy, multimillionaire in the 1950s and 60s named S.B. Fuller. And S.B. Fuller said, our problem, and S.B. Fuller owned several businesses and was employing blacks and whites in the 50s and 60s. And S.B. Fuller said, there's nothing wrong with capitalism except black people don't understand it. And so we listened to a lot of our so-called Black leadership, and they talked to us about socialism. And so I spend an entire chapter talking about the ills of socialism and what it really is versus what's being presented to us. And we're thinking socialism, everybody's going to be equal. Yeah, we're going to be equally poor. you know,
Poorly equal.
yeah. And so we look at capitalism and say, well, slavery was built off of capitalism because blacks were capital. And to a degree, yes, but we've never had pure capitalism in this system. The economic system in this country has always been a hybrid system of economics, with capitalism, fascism, socialism, communism, and feudalism. That's what this system's always been. And because of that, that's why we have an oligarchy today. And so, most of us don't have a true concept of that. And it goes back, I was telling Ozzy and my mentor once before that I had issues in high school and college with my economics high school teacher who had her PhD and my college economics professor. And we were doing an assignment in economics one day, and there was a question, what type of system do we have in America? And, of course, they're going to give you the main one. They're not going to talk about hybrid economics or anything like that. And they're not going to get into a whole lot of laissez-faire principles or things like that as well, or Austrian economics. And so I'm looking at it and, I'm looking at all the definitions that were presented. And I said, well, this looks like capitalism. And in the class I was in is what they call the smart students. And so it's like 13 of us in the class, my senior in high school. And so I wrote capitalism. Every other one of my classmates said democracy. And I'm like, democracy ain't no economic system. And so my economics teacher with her PhD and my classmates launched into me. They said, you don't understand what type of economic system we have. I said, it came across pretty simple to me. And so the teacher and my classmates went into a dissertation as to why I was wrong. But I never changed my opinion because what they didn't know, there was a public library right down the street from the school, a couple of blocks from the school. And I was going to check out economics books from the library before I ever took economics, years before, because I just love history and economics. And so I got to college and I was taking economics, and the professor called me told me he wanted to see me out the class one day. Okay, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong except disagree with it. And so I go to see him, and he said, Mr. Jones, he said, it's obvious you're a very intelligent young man. Okay, He said, but I'm going to fail you. I'm like, what you mean you're going to fail me? He said, I don't like you challenging me in class. I said, and me with my naive self, I thought college was a place to go. We could exchange ideas.
Right.
And I said, well, I said, I've been studying economics for a few years. And I said, I just kind of disagree with some of the stuff that's being taught. He said, well, I'm going to fail you. He said, I'm going to go down and see your advisor to make sure you can't sign up for another teacher's course, professor's course. You're going to have to take my class again. He said, and you're going to do what I say do on the syllabus. You're not going to question me. You're not going to challenge me. You're just going to do what the syllabus tells you to do, and I'll pass you. He said, but I'm not going to allow you to take another class. And so, I was 18, 19 at the time, so I didn't know, who do I go talk to? I just said, okay. And so I took his class again, and I passed it, but I was frustrated the whole semester.
Yeah.
And so, I said, these people are not interested in free ideas, free thoughts over here. And so, they kind of bounce me. I don't put down college, but I don't see why we're promoted as much as we do now. I go into all that stuff too on my YouTube channel. But but past the economics, I get into our, I guess, politics. And because especially, this time of year, with what's going on, everybody's it's the biggest divisive tactic outside of race in this country.
Absolutely.
And until we can get our people to really see things objectively, we're never going to be able to have a pure conversation about politics. And, just earlier today, someone asked me, what did I think about the current election? I said, well, I haven't voted but once since 2004. I said, and that was because a childhood friend was running for a school board position. And I said, and that's the only reason, because she's a Democrat, but, just because she's a childhood friend is the only reason I voted for her.
Mm-hmm.
And, I said, but one of the things I can tell you in my experience, I say, by me not voting anymore, I say, I can remain objective with whoever's running. Right. I said, and this has never failed. I said, every time I've talked to a Republican, be it black or white, I said, and I tell them why I have an issue with their candidate. I said, it has never failed. They always say, well, you've given me some things to think about. And said, and every time I talk to somebody that's voting Democrat and I tell them the issues I have with their candidate, I say, to this day, it has never failed. They always start talking about the opposing candidate. I said, make it make sense.
Yeah.
I said, so we can't have genuine conversation about politics because I really tell you how I feel about that too. And so, I just try to point out the fallacies of our support for one side. And, my thing is, and like I said, I never tell anybody not to vote. Go do what you want to do. But, I get the thing, one of the things I have to point out, I said, we've been giving the Democratic Party over 70% of our vote, with the exception of the two Eisenhower terms, since 1934. And that's 90 years, and we're still complaining about the same stuff now.
Yeah.
And so make it make sense.
Yeah.
We've given the great majority of our, and even with the Eisenhower term, Eisenhower got 68 and 64% of the black vote his two terms. So we're still giving the great majority of our vote to Democrats since 1934. And we are still no better off. Actually, they said, even though we're earning more economically as a people, we're worse off when you adjust for inflation than what we were in the 40s. Yeah. And so, spend some time with that. And, I move on into the next chapter where I talk about the church. Because everything I'm talking about in the book is things that are impacting us in a negative way. And we can't see it because we like to feel good. I'd rather do good because the feeling is going to come and go. You're never going to build anything and sustain anything long term off of feelings. And that's why, when I've told people over the years, I said, the problem with a lot of y'all marriages, why you can't sustain your marriage? I say, because you married your spouse based on how you felt. I said, you thought love was a feeling. I said, love is a decision. Right. I said, so when we start understanding that love is an action word, then our relationships can improve. And so, and I put the church, talking about the church at the back of the book on purpose. Because, you're stepping on holy ground when you start talking about the Black People's Church affiliation. Yeah. And, how they place the pastor above God, they place the pastor above their husband. If you're women, a man is, his marriage is on shaky ground if he ever starts to talk to his wife about the support she gives to the Black pastor. And, I'm glad I've never had that issue. And, but I talk about how the church fleeces us out of our money. Yeah. The church always when the church has a need, the church always want to come to you and ask about money. When you have a need, the pastor always want to tell you to pray about it. And so, money. It just doesn't work for me. Yeah. And so, I just kind of talk about that and, the next chapter, and, I just kind of talk about society's thought processes when it comes to Black people, regardless of what cultural background you're from. And, Isaiah, you've read the book, and so, you can testify to everything I'm saying here. You've read it already. Absolutely. And, I appreciate that. And, but I just talk about how other cultures, regardless of who you are, they don't want to take and I'm not saying all, but great majority of them, as good and pure-hearted as a lot of them are, they still don't want to put themselves in a position to have to answer to what they consider subordinate themselves to a Black person in society, regardless of how great that Black person is or what type of intellectual capacity that Black person have. They don't want to subject themselves to being what they consider under us, but they don't mind being above us. And so it goes back to, like I mentioned earlier about baseball. I worked this job while I was in college. And, I worked with a lot of people of Hispanic backgrounds, but from different Latino countries. So I worked with, some from Mexico. I worked with some from Puerto Rico. I worked with some from Cuba. And so they want to all go play baseball one Saturday. And I'm like, all right, I'll go, And when I've always played baseball, I could always hit. You're gonna have to throw balls if you don't, because if I hit it, it's gonna be a home run.
Yeah.
and so I would always play the outfield because I said, I'm not that good to be on no first base. Don't be throwing me no fastballs, expect me to tag somebody out because I'm not that good like that. And so I've always played the outfield. But since I didn't realize how heavily invested in baseball that the Hispanic culture was. And so with them seeing me as a big Black guy, because like I said, I'm in college at the time, I'm still all muscle back then. But so them seeing me as a big Black guy, they want to put me on first base. I said, man, let me go outfield. We want you on first base. I said, okay. And so after they threw the ball to me the first couple of times and I couldn't get them dudes out, man, get off of first base. I said, I told you that beforehand. So, and I talk about in the book how, they don't mind, they always want us on a sports team when we have get togethers and company picnics and stuff, because they believe we're the best athlete. But unfortunately, in society, they don't pay us the same homage. And, and that's unfortunate, because I was listening to a guy, Arab guy, a couple of days ago, and he said he made a statement, and he was talking about the slave situation, and he said, Black people were taken. He said Black people had everything taken from them, and then they were taken away from everything. And I let my wife listen to that, and she said, "Man, that's so true." And but that's what it is, and I just close out the book, just kind of talking about some of my personal issues dealing with health and all of that stuff, and how my wife's been a true champion in dealing with that. And since that time, I've had some more health issues, but it's part of the life process. But I thoroughly enjoyed writing the book. Most of the book, for the most part, was done. I was done with it probably within 3 months of starting.
Yeah.
The chapter that took me the most time was the chapter I spent on the church. And that chapter literally took me 3 years to write.
Oh, wow.
Because of the simple fact that's a very sensitive area. And I know in dealing with matters of the Bible, I have to be very careful when I'm talking about that, because the Bible says when you place yourself in a leadership or you put in a leadership position, you're going to be judged more harshly if you mislead people. And so that's why I spent so much time working on that chapter with the church. And, even when I released the book, I still had no plans to release it when I did. It's just I did self-publishing, of course you have to pay for that. And I had prepaid that well in advance. And I was just going to take my time and say, well, they can't get rid of my contract. I don't sign a contract. So, they got to wait on me. So they started contacting me around September of that year. Said, Mr. Jones, the best time to get your book out is right around Black Friday. Mm-hmm. I say, well, I ain't worried about that. Come on, Mr. Jones, you didn't pay for the contract, let's go ahead and get your book published. And then, so, with them, they just kept kind of egging me on. And I said, all right, man, let me go ahead and, do the final touches. And because I was trying to find somebody to kind of proofread everything before I submitted it. And they said, Mr. Jones, They say, we have somebody on staff that's going to do all the proofreading for you. I said, oh, okay, I said, that's not a problem. Because it was actually my second book. I just did a quick ebook some years before that on Amazon. No physical copy, but another mentor at the time, he had told me, because I was doing a lot of public speaking on motivational stuff. He said, put your little ebook on Amazon. He said, it gives you a little bit more credibility when you have it in the book. He said, even if, nobody reads it, they know. He said, when they see a book attached to your name, they think this dude's credible. He said, that's a lot of garbage out there. And so, but that's why I was kind of just dragging my feet. And then, I've been talking to my grandmother. My grandmother and I were very close. And, I started telling her about the book and, bouncing things off of her, and I started talking about some things. She was from northern Louisiana and, talked about working on plantations, as a kid and all of that stuff. And she started really giving me some historical understanding of our family background. And if you remember in the book, I see, there's a picture of my grandmother at the front of the book. Mm-hmm. And the day she died in a car accident, the day before I submitted the rough draft.
Wow. Yeah.
And, that really hurt me, and I kind of kicked myself for dragging my feet all that time because, we just never know when life's going to change situations for us. And so, that's why I put that little note in there to her, let me put it at the front so she can be the first one to read the book. And, but, I wanted to make sure, she could get a copy, and, and I know some people out there, they wanted copies of the book. They didn't want to read it. They just want to say they knew me. Yeah, and we can see that a lot in society. They want to say, I personally know the author. And and I've debated, like I've mentioned to you before, that with all the information I have, I could probably release 5 books within a 12-month period, and they all be easily 200-300 pages, and nothing is repeated. And but you also know, doing a book is hard work. Because you got to call out time, and you do have those days when you're sitting there and, man, I don't feel like writing today. And you get to the point, say, one guy told me years ago, he said, when you start writing, he said, even when you don't feel like writing, he said, just get up and write something. And so, I went back and, once I started going through the handwritten notes, because I'm still old school, I don't like typing up stuff. I got to write it out on a tablet first, and then I can come back and type it up. And in the process of looking at what I wrote down versus what I typed, I said, man, what was I thinking when I wrote that down? And, was I getting high or something? Right. But, I like to write it down, by hand. And then I'll go back and transcribe it and put it on, a computer screen or something, and then get it saved over to Word or something like that. And, but, it's just a matter of, getting up and saying, it's kind of like Zig Ziglar, I believe, said, about motivation. You don't want to bathe every day, but you do. I forgot how it goes exactly. But Zig Ziglar talking about, is kind of like bathing. You get up and do it every day anyway. And so, and that's what the guy was telling me. He said, even when you don't feel like writing, you're right. He said, you don't have to even use those ideas from that day, and I got what he was saying. It's about programming yourself to do something every day. And you and I, both listen to some audios of some people that say, do a little something every day. Yep. And that's the important thing, because we miss one day and we say, okay, I'll get to it tomorrow. And then sometimes you get to, man, I done missed 2 days in a row. And after you done missed 2 days in a row, now a week done passed. Then a week done passed, then a month done passed. And then we find ourselves trying to get back into the rhythm of trying to do it again. And I've heard over the years they say, it takes 21 days to make a habit. And I think it takes a little bit longer.
Yeah.
Because, I've done some things 21 days and got away from them still. And, but I think it just takes some daily discipline. And, that's the biggest thing, I think most of us have to focus on is our discipline because we can get caught up. And, I remember right when the day my grandmother died, the day before I was at a funeral of a pastor that I went to church years ago, and we weren't going anymore, but, he had passed, out of respect, we went to the funeral. And I ran into a guy that my wife and I met, at Office Max. That's where we worked at, two different stores at the time. And I ended up transferring to the store closer to her because I was still going to college and it was closer. And so one of the guys that was at the funeral was actually a guy we worked together with at Office Max. And he said, Myron, he said, man, and it had been over 20 years since we had seen this guy. And they said, we were just talking. One of the ladies at the job, we were talking. She just moved back from Atlanta and she was asking, did I keep up with any of you guys? And so I gave him my number, and, a few of us ended up meeting for dinner. We hadn't seen each other in years. And this was when the World Series was going on when the Astros win.
Oh.
And so, with me being former athlete, we're at the restaurant, but they got the World Series on. But I got my back to the TV because I've always been the type, I don't like watching sports. I like to play sports.
Yeah.
And the only time sports is on in our house is when family come over for to visit for a holiday or something, and they got to watch the game. But other than that, no sports get turned on over here. And so my back is to the TV. They're all focused on the game, and I'm like, I thought we were supposed to be trying to get caught up. But they're focused on the game. And Myron, who you want to win the World Series? I said, I don't care. Well, what team you pulling for? None of them. No way. That's right. You played football. So what football team you follow? None of them. Oh, you played football. I said, yeah. I said, I said, I haven't watched. I said, I watched one full football game, and I said, that's when TCU went to the national bowl game some years ago. I said, but before that, I said, the only last football game I've watched was when the St. Louis Rams and Tennessee Titans met in the Super Bowl. I think that was the 2000 Super Bowl. I said, I
Yeah.
don't spend a lot of time watching sports anymore. I said, I've never really got into sports like that. I was like, I like to see a good game. I said, but when I was younger, I said, I might have watched sports. I said, but I don't do that now. I said, I like to read. Oh, what do you do for fun? I read.
Right.
What's your hobby? I said, I read. What do you do when games on? I read. And so for the rest of the night, I see they tuned me out like I wasn't even there
Oh
because
man.
I wasn't talking their language.
Yeah.
And so one of the guys, he hadn't brought his wife, and I knew his wife, like I said, even though we hadn't seen each other, she wasn't in the sports either. So the two of us basically got ignored the whole night. So we spent the night just talking to each other. And, I got caught up with her because, she had been put on some medication for cholesterol a few years prior and messed up bad, caused her to have a brain aneurysm, and she had to have a procedure and operation and all that, man. So, it was good, being able to hear her testimony about that. But, our society, I'm not saying not anything's wrong with watching sports. I don't want people to ever believe I have a problem watching sports. But my issue is, okay, each one of us has about 10 to 15 minutes a day to learn something new. And if we choose to do it or not, that's on us. Because I was telling me and your, mentor, I said, I said, I don't want to sound crazy. I was just telling them this maybe a couple of weeks ago. I said, but I want to try to be able to reach people where my word carries weight while I'm still living. I said, I don't want to be dead. And then somebody say, man, we should have listened to him a long time ago. I said, I want to be beneficial and, make an impact now. I said, like you have all the streets and schools and buildings named after dead people. I, I don't want to be that person. I mean, they'll probably never do that for me anyway. But I'm just saying, I want to be impactful now. And until we can learn how to break down the barriers of politics and religion, we're really never going to be able to move forward as a community of people, in my opinion.
Great.
Because, I've dealt with, you know, our people in situations, and we can have a lot of the same ideas about what it's going to take to improve our communities. And they always bring up politics. And I keep telling them, I say, politics is not the answer. I say, let's leave our political differences at the door. I said, it's obvious our politicians haven't benefited us yet. And so once I say that, Ozzy, they're done talking to me. We have no more communication. I can't get any more, phone time with them or anything, because I'm not thinking like I should be on a plantation.
Right.
And, it's unfortunate. And, I tell, my wife all the time, I said, it shouldn't. I said, but it hurts knowing that we are this simple minded.
Yeah.
I said, I don't show it. And, people they could kind of hear it in some of my videos. I called it anger sometimes when I'm speaking, but our mentor told me, no, it's just righteous indignation.
Get that a lot too. Why you angry? I'm not angry.
Yeah. And I think, now that I think about it, because, I get kind of excited and animated doing some of my videos. And I think what it is it's a passion that's coming out of me because I want things to work for us as a people so bad.
Yeah.
And I want to see us succeed as a people. And we can't get past, well, he doesn't think like us politically.
All right.
And I don't talk, I'll use social media, to talk about politics, but I don't get in group forums and talk about politics. And I've been invited to do political speeches. That's the only time I've ever talked publicly in groups of people about politics, when I've been invited to speak. If I'm not invited to speak into a group about politics, I don't discuss it. I'll go sit in the meeting and keep quiet the whole time.
Yeah.
If you ask me one-on-one about politics, I talk to you about it, but I still won't talk into a group about politics. Even if you ask me a political question in a group, I'm not going to really engage you in a group because I know how most of us think. And it's not that I don't feel strongly in what I believe or my position. It's just that I don't want to get into arguments. I want to have civil conversations. I don't want to have something when you start shooting holes in people arguing, then they want to start trying to overtalk you. I want to see our community benefit. It's kind of like you and I talk about, the houses in my neighborhood.
Yeah.
And, I saw a lady last night and she said, stop talking about gentrification. And black lady, she said, stop leaving the hood and start buying the hood. And so, we're leaving the hood because we want to go where we think we have much better access to amenities and things like that. And while we're leaving, property values are decreasing because we place no value on it. And then other cultures are coming in and buying up our land for very cheap and then putting several $100,000 houses on those properties. They're not selling them, they're renting them out because what they're telling you is they're not going to give you access to buy the property back from them. And so we complain about gentrification, but we've gentrified the neighborhoods ourselves. There used to be a guy lived around the corner from me. And every weekend, every Friday, this dude would go to a luxury car dealership and rent a luxury car. One weekend he had a Lamborghini, and one weekend he had a Rolls Royce. Another weekend he had a Bentley. And I said, just look at him. I say, he's just throwing money away. I said, and this was some years ago, and I still didn't have the understanding I have now. I said, man, I said, what if he could take that money? He's renting these cars from every weekend and find a few other brothers that got some money like that. And why don't they start trying to buy these dilapidated properties around here and try to create some long-term residual income? And I said, but we don't have that type of thinking. You know, it goes back to something Marcus Garvey said. He said, we spent all of our money trying to look good. He
Show
said, and
off.
one of the biggest issues we have as a people, and Marcus Garvey, 100 years ago,
Yeah.
and I got all Marcus Garvey's books. And he said, one of the problems he saw with us as a people, he said, is we want to go into something that's already established instead of doing the sweat equity and establishing it ourselves. He used sweat equity. I'm just translating it to something I can think of right now. He said, you got a lot of our people that look at companies like Sears and Roebuck and talk about how big it is. He said, but Sears and Roebuck had to start somewhere. He said
Yeah.
it didn't start off as a big company. And I mean, look today, Sears and Roebuck's not even around.
They're gone. Yeah.
Uh, but we go back into how we really got into that mentality. That mentality was pushed onto us by the NAACP
Mm-hmm.
because we had a black business league with Frederick Douglass and some people back in the late 1800s. And then that kind of morphed into a Booker T. Washington's National Negro Business League, where Booker T. Washington said, yeah, education is fine. Being active politically is fine. He said, but the number one issue we need to focus on is economics.
Still to this day.
Yeah, still to this day. He said, so when we get economics, we can start influencing politics instead of trying to get politics to influence everything else. He said, we don't have no politics because we don't have no economics. He said,
Right.
politics is not going to work in our favor if we have no economics. And so if you, and I think I covered some of the people that did well, during that time under Booker T. Washington's teachings and a lot of those other NBL leaders, and they were talking about business ownership. And so when you start looking at the NAACP and which group of people actually created and formed the NAACP, they were the same people that had actually enslaved our ancestors.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so when they lost Eli Whitney's cotton gin, messed up their business because now you don't need as many hands. You don't need that free labor, but now you got to pay a black man to use his product.
Yeah.
They didn't want to do that. So now the slavery issue was going to stop anyway with or without the Civil War because Eli Whitney had patented the cotton gin. So when these people saw that they lost that free labor for all that money, and then black men and women, because they were doing all the labor, they were the ones that had all of the skills in society. So it was easy for them to transition their skills into business ownership. And so they started taking the skills they had and started creating businesses with those skills. And now the people of the slaveholder caste, didn't have access to really compete in society anymore because not all the hands are in their own businesses. And we talk about Tulsa's Black Wall Street, but before Tulsa, you had Negro Wall Street in Durham, North Carolina. That was a precursor to Tulsa. And money was changing hand a minimum 36 times up to 100 times before it ever left the community. Look at how many black businesses were being impacted like that. I mean, you had Deuce up in Richmond, Virginia. You had Black Bottom up in Detroit. I can't think of the one off the top of my head that was in Atlanta at the time, but we had and you look at, the race riots and all of that stuff where they destroyed all of these black communities during that time. And so the NAACP was formed to say, we got to get these black folks away from business ownership back into our white corporations.
Yep.
And so they put W.E.B. Du Bois as a face of the NAACP to say, look, it's a black organization. The NAACP has never been a black organization. And, and I'm just going to keep it clean because, you get called anti when you start talking about them peoples. And so they used W.E.B. Du Bois to tell, and he started going into black churches and organizations and meetings and stuff, said, our small mom and pop Black businesses don't carry as much prestige as these large white corporations. So y'all need to start focusing on getting college degrees so you can go work in these big corporations because that carries more prestige. But see, what it was, they were upset because Black people were becoming very wealthy as business owners.
Right. Yep.
And see, we don't even know. I mentioned S.B. Fuller earlier. There was another guy during that same period named A.G. Gaston. And both of them have books. I don't have S.B. Fuller's book because it's $100. But I do have A.G. Gaston's book, and A.G. Gaston and S.B. Fuller, they were competing as to who was the wealthiest Black man at the time.
Yeah.
Both of them were multimillionaires in the 50s and 60s, employing thousands of people. And they were actually, what most people don't know, they were actually financing the civil rights movement behind the scenes.
They were. In his book, he talks a lot about that too.
Yeah. And while they're financing these guys in the civil rights movement, the civil rights leaders are telling Black people not to support their businesses because they weren't out marching with them. Yeah. And I'm like, our minds have been messed up.
That's what it is.
This man is, Martin Luther King didn't have no job to offer you. Mm-hmm. This guy's literally taking care of King and his crew when they travel. And y'all listening to King tell y'all not to support the man who's employing you. I mean, what kind of sense does that make?
None at all.
But see, that was the whole thing. They tried it with the NAACP and W.E.B. Du Bois. And, it's still questions out there about Booker T. Washington's death, because he was 51, 52 years old when he died. And, they said cold or pneumonia killed him. I'm like, yeah, okay. And, it's just amazing after Booker T. Washington died, how the NAACP went into overdrive, how all those race riots, because Booker T. Washington died in 1915. Well, the race riots started in 1917. Yeah. We didn't have no Black communities being burned down long as Booker T. Washington lived. And so you think of what they call it, a red summer? That was what, 1919, when they burned all of them Black neighborhoods. Yep. It was also doing, you think about when Booker T. Washington died, right after that, you had World War I. And so because they were excluding Black men from the military service, the Black men were taking all the jobs that the white guys abandoned. And so when the white guys got back from the war, they couldn't get them jobs back. So now they're upset at Black people, and that's another reason they started burning down Black communities. Yep. And so it was a combination of the NAACP and the war effort that really destroyed us. And see, most people don't know, even after Black Wall Street was burned down, they actually rebuilt it, but Black people wouldn't support it at that point. Yep. And so, we just had a lot of people, you're familiar with Madam C.J. Walker. Yeah. But she had a mentor named Annie Malone.
That's right.
And Annie Malone had built that huge cosmetic. She was richer than C.J. Walker.
That's right.
And then she married a guy, and then her husband went to the NAACP and told the NAACP it was his business, and the NAACP took her to court on his behalf and sued her and stole all her wealth.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's just sickening when we hear about incidents like these. I mean, I've read so many accounts of different things over the years, and I mean, we don't have enough time to talk about all this stuff on here, but when I read some of this stuff, I just break out in tears because it hurts so much. You familiar with Reginald Lewis?
I am. Yep.
And Reginald Lewis was 49 years old. But see, Reginald Lewis had done something that nobody had ever done. He completed the first $1 billion business transaction in this country.
Right.
Reginald Lewis played by their rules, beat them at their own game, and they ostracized them for it. And, he talks in his book, Watching White Guys Have All the Fun. He said, once I did that, they blocked every effort for me trying to buy anything else after that point. But he said, his brother said there was one word you could never say around Reggie. He said, you could never say it was because of racism. He said, because Reggie said that's just putting a victim tag on yourself when you say it's because of racism. And he said because he like Bill Cosby did with, trying to buy NBC. Mm-hmm. Reginald Lewis and Bill Cosby were trying to buy one of the stations together. Reginald Lewis tried to buy one of them baseball teams out of California, professional team. And his brother said, we sat down after they blocked all him. I said, Reggie? He said, and he just looked at me and said, man, I know. And he said, but even in spite of him knowing, he still wouldn't allow us to say the word. And, so it's unfortunate, but we have to be better as a people. We have to fight better. We got to fight harder. We got to work harder. And, we got to do things because they're trying to do everything they can to make sure we don't succeed. And I mean, you just look at everything that's going on. And this guy, the Arab scholar I was mentioning earlier, he somebody played him a clip of a white guy saying, that black people are the biggest criminals. And he said, yeah, if you look at the statistics that they put forth in this country, and he started breaking it down. He said, black people get arrested more than everybody else. He said, especially if it's a white victim. And this he's a white Arab guy, and he said, if you have a white victim, he said, they're going to normally lock up a black guy. He said, when you have a white perpetrator, he said, they're normally going to escape. They're normally going to escape going to prison. He said, he said, the stats are lying to you. He said, but that's giving white people a sense of superiority. He said, they don't want to know the truth. He said, my ancestors, he said, white ancestors, he said, they've done all these evil things. He said, I'm going to just say it. They ain't built nothing. He said, everything they have, they stole from somebody. He said, they are the true authors of copy and paste.
Right.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it is.
So he was just, I mean, he's breaking down so much stuff. Shahid Bosun, I think is his name. I don't know if you've come across him.
I heard him. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, he's putting it out there. But, we just have, we're fighting, unfortunately, we're fighting from so many angles. We're being attacked at so many different levels. And I think sometimes because of the trauma that have been passed down to us through our generations, from our grandparents to great-grandparents to our great-great-grandparents that, survived slavery and worked through slavery and all of that. I think, we just had this mentality that I'm such a small person. I'm just one person. I can't do anything to fight this system. Well, we were never meant to fight the system one-on-one.
No.
Because the system is too big. We can only fight the system when we unite. And that's one of the biggest things we have in our community is disunity.
I have politics, religion, everything. They try to, yeah. We don't even realize it.
Yeah. And so, my thoughts have always been, okay, you take this one area, see what you can find. I'll take an area, see what I can find. We got somebody else over here dealing in this area, and we'll see what we can find. And then we'll collectively come together and share what each one of us found. And I said, then we cut and splice, okay, this looks good, this doesn't. Let's take all the good ideas we came together with, put those together, and then let's try to form a collective where we can fight. But one of the things I'm finding out about us as a people too is we think we have good jobs. We making six figures, we up in the higher six figures, we don't think we can be touched. But like I heard a guy say years ago, you have the biggest rung off the ladder to fall from.
Yeah, look at Puffy.
You climb up the ladder, the further your drop is.
That's right. That's right. Look at Puffy.
And so, we look at people and say, I remember I was speaking one year. I was at a high school. It might have been at a business event, but I was talking to some high schoolers. And, they get caught up, typical high school, cars and all that type of stuff, especially when, you came through school like me, you saw a lot of dope men with the nice vehicles.
Yeah.
But I was speaking at a high school one year, and one of the students asked, because I was talking about success. Oh, Mr. Jones, you talking to us about success. You know, what kind of car do you drive? I said, I drive a Mazda 3. Oh, and the whole room just burst out in laughter. And I let them finish laugh. I laughed with them. And, you know, I know that kind of puzzled them, you know, because I laugh with you, you know. I laugh at myself. I don't have a problem laughing at myself.
Right.
And when they finished, I said, let me teach y'all something right now. I said, y'all just asked the wrong question. What do you mean? I said, you asked what type of car I drive. Well, yeah, we want to know. You're talking about success. I said, that's the wrong question. I said, never ask a man or woman what type of vehicle they drive. I say, ask the man or woman what drives them.
Right.
I say, then you'll find success. I say, because you got a lot of people out there that got nice vehicles. I say, but their character is garbage. Their integrity is garbage. I said, and I guarantee you, none of you in this room would want to be in the presence of those people with those nice vehicles based on their character and integrity.
Right.
I said, I'll sit down in any room with anybody. I'll sit down in any room with somebody's wife, you know, by myself and never have any type of improper thoughts toward her because my character and integrity is good.
Right.
And so once I told them that, I said, you should, the whole room just was in stunned silence.
Yeah,
But,
you never
you
heard that
know,
before.
yeah, they never heard that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so we want to look good on the outside, but we don't understand everything that comes along with that. You know, it's like, you know, just some issues. You know about some of my health situations, and you know some of the things that I dealt with, and you know, because of what happened, you got some people who know what happened, but in order to keep the job, in order not to upset the apple cart, they just plan on letting me suffer for the rest of my life because
Yeah.
I want to keep my job,
Right.
but don't know at any given time if you make a mistake, they will fire you on the spot.
Just a small mistake at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you know, so we got a lot of stuff. We gotta, like our mentor always said, you know, we gotta start unpeeling those onion layers off people's brain. Or like one of his mentors said, you know, we part-time brain surgeons. You know, we gotta get to people's brains to really understand how they thinking. But um, there's a guy, he was a pastor out of the Bahamas. I don't know if you've ever heard of Miles Monroe.
Miles Monroe, yes, I have.
Okay. Now, our mentor is the one that introduced me to Miles Monroe years ago, a book of his called Burden of Freedom.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was listening to I mean, I used to eat up Miles Monroe daily, I see,
Yeah, he got some good
daily.
stuff. Yeah.
And Miles Monroe said something one time. He said, the problem with a lot of you, he says, you don't know how to communicate. And, you know, at one point in my life, I used to read Dale Carnegie's book, you know, once a year, How to Win Friends and Influence People,
Yeah.
because I always wanted to be an effective communicator. And you know, that's for most people, they say that's the thing more people are afraid of than death, public speaking. And you know, but I just outside of public speaking, I just wanted to be able to communicate with people in general. And Miles Monroe said, y'all don't know how to communicate. And you know, most people think when you say communicate, you need to have a whole bunch of fancy words and all that stuff and big vocabulary. You just need to be able to talk to people at their level.
Mm-hmm.
And most people don't know how to do that, you know. And you know, and you probably are too, but I'm at the point, you know, when I'm talking to somebody, I can tell this dude don't know nothing. He's trying to use all these big fancy words. And I'm like, dude, just keep it simple.
Keep it simple.
You know, it's just me and you. You know, who you trying to impress? And you know, because I've you know, I've done radio interviews and stuff, and you know, I've come through. And, you know, I've been trying to keep it professional because one of my neighbors was listening in on one of the shows some years ago, and she was a former high school counselor and school teacher. Man, I almost felt like I was back in school when she called me after the interview
Yeah.
because she
Correct.
was telling me about all my improper English and all that. I said, and all I was saying, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. And then when I hung up the phone to my wife, I said, why am I answering her? I don't need to answer her. But I didn't tell her that. You know?
And they
But you
missed the
know,
message. They missed the
yeah.
message altogether. They
And
missed
so,
it.
you know, I'll say, you know, in my videos, I'll say, you know, every now and then, you know, But I'm trying to communicate, and most people understand what you're saying, even regardless of what you say. But Miles Monroe said, "You're not able to communicate people because you don't know their language."
Yeah.
He said, "You want to be so good chasing the kingdom and trying to lead people to the kingdom." He said, "But they're not going to let you in. It's all you come with is kingdom talk." He said, "If you got a coworker that loves football," he said, "and you don't watch football," he said, "watch a little bit of the game so you can communicate with it." He said, "Football is going to allow him to open a door to you." He said, "But you still don't dive right into kingdom talk immediately." He said, "Get to know a little bit more about what drives him, what excites him, what moves him before you start trying to talk kingdom talk to him."
Yeah.
And he said, "That's the problem with most of y'all Bible believers out here." He said, "Y'all want to slam right into people with the Bible." He said, "They blocking you." He said, "Because that's not what they want to hear." And I remember I was in Barnes and Noble some years ago, and a young guy approached me. I think I was in the motivational self improvement section, and we got to talking, and he invited me to his church. And I said, "Well, man, I'll come." I said, "You extended an invite." I said, "Anytime somebody extends me an invite, I don't mind coming." I said, "Just let you know, I have a church home. My wife and I have a church home." I said, "So I don't want you to get any ideas that I'm going to join your church."
Right.
Uh, I said, "But I'll come." I said, "I'll." And so he sends me the invite. I show up, and it was way out of Bel Air and Highway 6. And you're probably familiar with that area in Houston area now. But that's not close to my house. And so I go out there, and after about an hour and a half, they ain't done nothing but sung songs and gave testimony. And I'm like, bro, should have warned me about this, because
Been
I'm
there.
used to hour and a half, 2 hours, we done got everything in. It's time to go.
Yeah.
But if you warn me beforehand, okay, I done prepared myself for it. And so after an hour and a half, I just got up and left. And so he called me late on that day. "Well, Brother Myron, what happened?" I said, "Hey, man," I said, I honored my word. I came out, you invited me. I said, "That's just a little untraditional for me." I said, "I appreciate the invite." I said, like I said, I honor my commitment. I said, "I'm a man of my word. I told you I was coming. I showed up." And "No, Brother Myron, God told me to tell you this is where you're supposed to be going to church, and you're supposed to join our church and all that." I said, "Man," I respect you. I said, "I respected you enough to come to your church." I said, "But I made it clear beforehand. My wife and I had a church home. No, you just don't understand what God told me to tell you." I said, "Well, let me put it to you. I said, me and you ain't talking to the same God." I said, "Because my God didn't tell me that."
Yeah. Right.
And so, he got all mad with me, and, slam, I don't know how he hung up in my face or whatever. But,
Oh, wow.
I wasn't bothered by it, you know. But one of the things he and I had talked about in Barnes and Noble that day was how, since he had found God, they didn't want to be around him anymore. I said, all of us come to God at different times in our lives. I said, we just have to be patient with the ones we don't think are where they need to be. I say, that's not our path. That's not our path to and plan to judge them. I say, because nobody's going to come at the same time. I say,
Right.
it's all a personal decision. And he ended up calling me several days later.
Mhm.
And, he's still trying to convince me that I need to join his church.
Yeah.
I don't remember his name, but I said, "You want me to?" I said, "Let me tell you something." I said, "I know exactly why your friends don't listen to you."
Mm.
I said, "Because you don't know how to communicate."
That's
I
right.
said, "You're trying to push something onto people that they're not ready for." I said, "You can't push." I said, "I'm a total stranger." I said, "And look how you're trying to talk to me." I said, "So I can imagine how you're talking to the people that's closest to you." And so, I've always remembered what Miles Monroe said about being an effective communicator. And, I've dealt with it in job situations. I used to be a vendor, where I had to go from store to store, South Texas, South Louisiana, South Mississippi was my territory one time. And, I think a lot of the people, when I would go in the store, they enjoyed seeing me because, one of the first things, hey, how you doing? It's good to see you again. And they're not being asked that from their superiors at work. And then after how life been treating you. And if they had children, I always knew their children's name. And that was the only time I was speaking when I go and start. I said, okay, how is such and such? How is this child doing? How's coming along in football? How is this child doing in math? I always knew things about, and I wasn't looking for anything from them.
Yeah.
And so I literally had one manager come to me one time, Ozzy, and she said, she asked, can I talk to you? I said, what is it? Her name was Pam. She said, could you not talk to my employees anymore? I'm like, well, I'm a vendor. I have to talk to your employees.
Right.
She said, well, I prefer you not to. I said, well, why not? She said, well, she said, you're making me uncomfortable because you're asking them things about their families and I don't even ask. I said, that ain't got nothing to do with me, Tim. I say, that's a you problem.
Right. I know how to communicate.
Yeah. And but I honored her wishes. I said, well, I don't want her to call a company and say, Myron being disruptive and things. So I just left people alone. But because of what I had done over the course of time, when I stopped speaking to them, guess what they did? When I came in the store, they sought me out.
That's right.
And I went and told her one time, I said, Pam, I said, I didn't go back there messing with them. I said, they came to me.
Right.
And but that's the way society is, and it goes back to I spoke at a career day event one time, and it was about 30 of us there, 30 speakers there that day. And we every 15 minutes they move us sending a new group of children. So you wouldn't kind of bore the children, and we were there all day. So we had classes coming in every 15 minutes all day. And so about halfway through the day, the teacher that put on the event at the school, she came to me in between sessions. He said, Mr. Jones, our principal wants to see you after school. I said, well, I ain't in school no more. I ain't got to go to no principal office. And she said, no, it's nothing like that. I said, okay, I'll go see her. So I stopped by the principal's office. And the principal, she said, Mr. Jones, I just want to know what is it about you that are making our students gravitate to your talks? I said, do you really want to know the truth? She said, yeah, we need to know. She said, because every student that comes out of one of your talks, they're excited. She said, and we're looking at the students coming out of these other sessions, and it's almost like, we had to go to that. I said, well, I'll tell you what it is. I said, 30 speakers of us are here. I said, 29 of them are talking about their jobs. She said, what's wrong with that? I said, everything. I said, because you had FBI agents there, you had police officers, you had medical professionals, you had attorneys. I said, that's only exciting for the people that are going into those professions. I said, and after a while, that's boring to them anyway. They don't want to hear you keep talking about it. They want to be in the environment of trying to do it. I said, I'm totally different. I said, I tell the children my name. I said, and from that point forward, I started asking the children questions. I said, my talks are interactive. I said, I said, I don't have time to ask each child. I said, but I pick a few students out of the group. What do you want to do for a living? What do you want to do for a living? I said, and no matter what profession they tell me, I say the answer is always the same. I say, but I make it about the student and not about me.
Yeah.
I said, and even though I didn't call on the other students, they feel engaged because I engaged their classmates. I said, because you always have some students in every class, you're going to have students that, God forbid, you call on them. They're shaking in their boots because they don't want you to call on them. I said, so they're happy that I'm calling on somebody else. They're happy that I'm engaging them in my talk. I said, and then when I give them the answer on what it's going to take to succeed at whatever profession they choose, it encompasses everybody in the room.
Right.
And so the principal talked to me about getting involved in some stuff they're doing, but I don't think she ever created the event or organization. She never got back with me, and the teacher said, well, I don't know, she just dropped the ball, Mr. Jones. Because I'm always willing, to help when I could. And and especially with the school being in a predominantly Black community, I
Yeah.
was really excited about that.
Yeah.
And but I'm just talking. It's after 6 o'clock. You said 30 to 45 minutes.
No, I'm just about to say we will wrap it up. So, but there is one thing that you know, I'd like for us to get back on here, maybe on a regular basis if you had the time to do that. Because there's some things that you said that I would like us to break down in just to a
Okay.
whole episode
Okay.
needed. And as far as we're talking about communication, as far as I understand, I always learned that communication is when you hear somebody that has some knowledge that you can learn from, you be quiet and you listen,
Okay.
So I do. That's what I do. So,
Yeah.
for my audience, they know that, I bring guests on like yourself that have just a world of knowledge and,
Okay.
just here listening. So I definitely want us to, I've taken some notes and I broke down some things that I want us to talk about further and expand on because again, they're so needed in our community. And,
Yeah.
and from the studies and all the things, knowledge that you've been there, done that, that I think is going to help some of our audience, because
Okay.
a lot of times in our community, we talk about being woke and we not woke,
Yeah.
we not at all, so.
No, agree with you.
And I definitely appreciate you having on. And then we'll set up a schedule. Like I said, you let me know. We can do it on a monthly basis, every other month,
Okay.
that and have you on as a regular guest.
All righty. Well, I appreciate the invite.
I appreciate you, sir. I appreciate you. And then I'll get together you offline here in the next day or two, and we'll kind of work that out.
Okay.
All right, appreciate you, Myran Jones. And again, tell them the name of your book.
But hey, what do I know? If you want to purchase that, it is available at a lot of resellers, Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But also, we said, but hey, what do I know? If you would like a personal copy, autographed and signed and personalized by me, you can email me at Myran Jones. That's MyranJones @gmail.com. And we can talk about, how you can get access to that. And, I can get it shipped out to you if you want paperback or hardcover, or even digital. I have that too,
Right.
And some people have chose that option because of, whatever the financial situation is. I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.